Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am interviewing Sean, and don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and stay tuned for what we will be talking about next. Welcome back. We are in beautiful Irvine, California. We are at one of our churches that we attend, and today we are going to be speaking about Sean Khalifa's new book about state prisons and some of the events that he got to live in those long 16 years of his life. Stay tuned, guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe the video. Today we're going to be talking about his book that he just got out, which is actually available at Amazon, and it is self-titled Sean Khalifa, and it speaks about his experience basically in the state prison and the juvenile halls that he spent 16 years of his life in. I'll be asking him questions, and we'll try to dissect his brain. And the book. When I met Sean, and still today, I am just in awe of what God has done in his life and what he's gone through. Today I have the pleasure to interview Sean, and we will be talking about his brand new book, which is self-titled Sean Khalifa, available now on Amazon. So go ahead and check it out, buy it for yourself. It's such a good read. You will be so enlightened by it, what happens in the prison system and all those 16 years of his life that he spent behind bars. Still to this day, I cannot even like comprehend how this man was in there. Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. I really don't. And I was telling him yesterday that it actually makes me a little bit emotional, because now that I'm a mom and I get to see him and I know him firsthand how he is, I just can't imagine him being behind bars for all those years. I really cannot. But anyways, let's jump into it. So what I want to ask him is, how was your mentality going into, being in your first prison? Like, how did you feel? What did you think? What was going through your mind?
Going into my juvenile hall or the state prison?
No, the actual state prison.
Oh, okay, yeah. So my first state prison was the North Kern Reception Center, and I was relieved to be out of the county jail, and I was relieved to have finality, because you spend so much time worried about getting life in prison that it was nice to know what my sentence was. It was nice to know that you could go to prison and you could have better food, television, you could see your family and hug them. So
was that something that you couldn't do before?
Yeah, you can't do that in the county jail. In the county jail, you get visits behind glass, only for an hour. You can't have televisions, radios in your cell. It's really restrictive and violent. You can't really live. You can't really find that joy and just relax. You can read a lot of books, but it's not
I
the
just
same.
can't imagine relaxing in prison.
Well, that's the goal. You want to be able to relax. You don't want to be uptight the whole time you're there. You don't want to be stressed out, or you're going to age and die quickly. So the goal is to be relaxed, and it's the way you find relaxation there is you get a good television, you get a nice radio, get your favorite radio stations, get some music, make some good friends where you don't have to feel tense every day, because you know you have some good people around you, and keep in touch with your family.
So tell us a little bit about the book. What are all those dots on that
all these dots
cover?
So they can see dot 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 dot. That's California. So there's another part of California that exists that a lot of people don't know about. There's a whole nother world and society outside of, when you look at a California map, you see Los Angeles, you see San Diego, see Riverside, you see Sacramento, you see San Francisco, Oakland, Redding, Eureka. What you don't see is Crescent City, Pelican Bay State Prison. You don't see High Desert State Prison. You don't see San Quentin State Prison. You don't see California State Prison, Los Angeles County. You don't see Donovan State Prison. So what I did was, I just let you know that this is what our state looks like from a prisoner's point of view, from our mindset. So this was my life. These were the cities I could travel to, where I could live. This was my California for 16 years. And
So those are all the prisons that are in California right
Yeah.
now?
yeah, there's 35 total prisons. The only ones that aren't on here are the female facilities. So you're missing one down in Chino. You're missing
That's
one up north
insane.
in Chowchilla. Yeah,
That is so many prisons.
that is a lot. Yeah.
So firsthand, I know that I was reading the part where somebody took. What was the incident about the floss and gums bleeding? Can you tell me a little?
Oh.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, so I was in a prison reception center, and in prison you could only be celled up with your race. So when I got to the prison, they just threw me in a cell with a white person, and I'm Egyptian and white. I'm not full-blooded white. And in prison you have to go with your group. So the fact that they were throwing me in the cell with white people was putting my life and their life in jeopardy. In one of those instances, they put a young kid who just came off a suicide watch in my cell, and I knew he couldn't be in there. He knew he couldn't be in there, so I told him. I said, hey, I run with the blacks and the others, specifically. I hang out with Crips, and you can't be in my cell. He said, I know, I can't be in here. He was stressed out, but he didn't know how to leave. And the way people leave is they normally have a physical altercation. So it was his idea, and I encouraged it, was to go back on suicide watch. So he took some floss, which wasn't floss, it was string, because we're not allowed to have floss, but you take the string out of your boxers, and he made himself bleed. He ran it through his teeth, into his gums, made himself bleed, and wiped it on his wrist and showed the officers, hey, I'm gonna kill myself, because he asked officers to move him, and they weren't gonna move him unless we had violence. So that was his way out of there, and it kept me and him from having an altercation, which was great.
So did you feel that you had to um, do things like this to keep yourself
Yeah.
at peace and alive?
Yeah, so sometimes in prison you have to sacrifice. You could have morals, but you have to make a decision. Is you upholding your morals worth you dying in prison? Is it worth you being like brutally murdered or assaulted? And sometimes I would say God gives you a pass when you're in a tough situation. You don't get a pass to just be inhumane, but you get a pass to lie if you have to. Like, for instance, this guy faked his suicide attempt. God's not going to
Yeah.
be mad at him or me for encouraging that. God is, I think, more compassionate than that, and understands the evil in this world that you're up against.
Yeah. And then what happened? Did you see that guy again? Was
I
he
never saw-
there? You never saw him again?
I never saw that kid again.
Oh,
No.
wow.
And the prison system is large. When I arrived, there was 190,000 people there. So the chances of you seeing people twice isn't as high as you would think it would be. You do see people you know everywhere you go, but there's a lot of guys I either had an incident with, or it was just drama, and never came across them again, which was a blessing.
Good. I know that we have regular society that has never been in prison, that has never been to jail or anything like that. We have like already a perception that basically everybody that's in prison is a criminal. And getting to know you, getting to know Sean, and getting to know his story and the people that he became friends with on a real human, spiritual level, that was not the case. You know, I found out that was not the case. What I thought of prison and what I thought of prisoners literally was not anything close to what it really in reality is. So can you tell us a little bit of people that made an impact in your life in the prison as a prisoner?
Yeah, so early on in juvenile hall, some of the juvenile hall staff had the biggest impact on my life. Some of the group counselors. One of them in particular, my dad was homeless, and he would pass him on his way to work every day. So he started bringing him food in the mornings, which was really nice.
So he knew that he was your dad?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was sad, but that level of humanity for somebody that is charged with murder, about to spend the rest of his life in prison, for that group counselor, that staff member to reach out and do that, meant that I was going to listen to that staff member. I was going to respect them, pick up any bit of wisdom they had for me.
And how did
And
you
he was
find
Christian,
out
Mr. David. Yeah. How did I find out?
that he was doing that?
He told me.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. And
Oh.
Mr. David was really cool. He was in the military. He was a part of the mission where they sent him down, I believe, to get Noriega, and he got shot in the head with an AK. So he's a former Marine with a big dent in his head who worked as one of our counselors. Coolest guy ever.
Wow.
Yeah, he has his own powerful story and
That's
testimony
amazing.
to God. Yeah.
It is really good to know that some of the people in there that were on the other side of the fence are humane and are good people, you know, because knowing you and other people's stories of, you know, what it is like to be in there with people who have the key, you know, who get to leave every day and go back to their families and actually have a life out here, unlike you guys that are in there, you know, a lot of them for life. I got to hear a lot of the stories that a lot of these officers were not nice.
True.
How many, I mean, what's the percentage of what what you experienced in there? Like, you know, how many of them were actually nice, were real,
Yeah.
and did you experience any that were bad
And
and
abusive. Yeah.
and evil?
Yeah, so starting out in juvenile hall, more of them were abusive than when you get to the adult system. Except the county jail, all the sheriffs were abusive. But in juvenile hall, only about like 70% of the staff were abusive. Um, a lot of that had to do with they were physically bigger than us. We weren't familiar with the law. We couldn't file complaints and lawsuits against them. Even though those remedies are available for youth, you can't really do it. So you get sexually abused by females that work there and even males that work there, but you also get physically abused. I've seen kids picked up, slammed on their face. I've seen kids punched, hit in the back of the head with pepper spray, busting their head open. And then the staff are aggressive and violent, cussing the whole time, just being demeaning. And by the time you get to the county jail, I've seen more of the same, except it was measured and it was like one at a time. And it wasn't that they tried to have a dominating presence, but there was like a balance because adults could push back more. We're physically stronger, bigger, and we could file lawsuits. By the time you get to prison, they get smarter. They'll isolate you and kill you, or they'll isolate you and beat you. They'll do it in public in front of everybody as well. But a lot of times, because we have so many phones in there, people want to isolate you and then assault you.
Yeah.
But I've seen it in public. The whole building watched people get brutalized by officers. They would put a man in handcuffs and shackles and uppercut him, hit him with batons. So the percentage, I always say juvenile hall was about 70, county jail like 100. The sheriffs were really aggressive. You have maybe 1 out of 100, so 99.9% of the sheriffs were aggressive and abusive in Riverside County Jail. In state prison, depends on what prison you go to. When you go to a prison like Pelican Bay, only about 10% maybe were really aggressive because if they
Were
mess
they
with the wrong
scared?
people, a lot of them were scared, yeah, to be honest, because their
I'm sorry, I
families,
shouldn't laugh. But
no, but their families' lives would be in jeopardy because you have organizations that have community influence. You have guys sitting in an institution right now that can have your whole family murdered if you say the wrong thing or disrespect them. So for the officers knowing this, there was a balance. Only a small percentage who didn't really care about their family or care about themselves would push an issue. And what happened was they would cause harm to other officers. Other officers would get stabbed as a result of another officer being a jerk. So in a prison like Pelican Bay, only 10% were openly disrespectful, aggressive. Maybe the other 40% were on the verge. They were withdrawn because they knew there was consequences. The other 50%, I would say, were pretty decent, trying to be nice, regardless of what motivated that. But you go to an institution like Lancaster, the abuse goes up a little more. You could have like 40% aggressive and abusive. CMC State Prison, maybe like 50%. And then when you get like one race of officers at an institution, like for instance, CMC white officers, Pelican Bay, white
Why
officers.
does that happen?
It's the demographics of the area. San Luis
Oh,
Obispo,
okay.
Crescent City is more predominantly white. You go to a city like Lancaster, where you have residents from South Central, Compton, Watts, you have Hispanics. The white officers can't be as abusive, and they're known to have kind of the most structured abusive system in places towards Mexicans and Hispanics. They will abuse whites as well, but they may get off a little extra targeting blacks and Hispanics. But when you go to a prison like Lancaster, your blacks have to have their own group. So if they want to be abusive, you have some officers that ain't with it, some are. But I've seen it where blacks officers didn't support the Mexican and white officers who were kind of working together to abuse people. I would see
Yes.
black people, like black officers, put their hands up, like I don't want no parts of that. I'm not gonna hit that dude. I'm gonna back up so I don't get in trouble, and vice versa. So it depends where you're at. So like all these prisons, each one has different culture, rules, politics. And you go to a prison
It's
like
crazy.
Donovan is dominated by Hispanic officers, and they have their prison gang. Corcoran has their prison gang.
It's
Wasco.
crazy because you never get to hear any of this. I mean, it's always on the news. It's always the guys that are in shackles and spending life in prison. Those are the bad guys. Those are the ones that society needs to be careful for. Those are the guys that need to spend their lives in prison, that need to be there. Those are the guys that many people, probably hundreds of people around California want to keep in there, such as, I don't know, whatever law enforcement and, other people want to keep in there. But you never get to hear about the side from a prisoner point of view, and I've
It's beautiful.
seen,
God is good. That's why I'm
yeah,
out here.
and I mean, we've seen movies, we've seen shows, and a lot of these shows do show that the officers are very abusive and that they have their own way of doing things that shouldn't be happening in there. But because prisoners are seen as less than, and they don't have any rights because they are in there, they do abuse their power, and it's unfair. And I think that we need to shine the light more on that, because people need to be aware of what's happening in there. And this is California. You guys are people that are in prison still. They are residents, and they are here. They're human too. They're not animals. So, like everybody says, there's always two sides to every story. And knowing Sean's story and knowing that he shouldn't have been in there for as long as he was, more people should have known about his story sooner, and he should have gotten out of there sooner. But for whatever reason it did, it happened the way that it did, and I'm glad that he's out here now. But I know that there's people that shouldn't be in there that are. And do you have any, I mean, did you make any friends that you knew that were kind of in your similar situation
Yeah,
that shouldn't have been in there?
a lot of people.
You don't have to mention any names,
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people, and it's not fair because, to be honest, a lot of them were minorities. I'm a mixed race, so you could put me in the minority category. I'm also half white, but I don't think I have it as bad perceptually in the community as my friends with darker skin. So all of my
Yeah.
black friends who have 100 to 200 years to life for non-murders, it breaks my heart because they
100?
have moms over 100. Easily
Wow.
over 100 for a black man who commits a robbery. And for
And
me,
I
they
think
have
this is-
mothers, sisters, kids, and they
Yeah.
lose them, so they suffer as well.
I think it's so sad because we as society, we never get to hear these sentences. I mean, I've never, before knowing Sean, I didn't know anything about the prison system. And 100 years, I mean, I think that that's a little bit over the top. That gives somebody no hope, no future. Like, that's their life is done,
And
and I
mind you,
think
they
that's
didn't hurt
tragic.
anybody, and they might have, there's harm associated with a robbery, but if they didn't choke nobody out, they didn't punch nobody, they didn't threaten nobody's life, but they still had their life taken by the system. Really easy because of
Yeah.
the way it's structured.
And now that we're already on that, I know that, you do mention in there that about what was it, what happened in LA in the 1990s
Oh, the
with,
Rodney King
yeah, the
riots.
Rodney
Yeah.
King riot. How did that influence your life? I mean, how old were you when that happened, and how did that impact where your life was heading?
Yes, that's a great question. I was I just turned 3. I think I was 3.5 years old. So I was a
And you
little
were in
kid.
LA, right?
Yeah, we were in the jungles, and I don't remember much about the riots. I only remember one snippet, and that was my mom coming out, and she had this favorite store I would always look at. My mom was like, "That's my favorite store," and I remember this day it was destroyed. It was all burned down and rubble. I was like, "Mom, what happened to your store?" And what happened was she took pictures of it. It was burned down the night after the Rodney King verdict, and we lived in the heart of the jungles in the apartment section, right next. The jungles is right next to South Central. It's basically one, but it's separate. The jungles is unique. The
Yeah.
area we were at. My dad had us there because he was a heroin addict, so he moved us there to be closer to his drugs and to where he could get it. It was lower income, which is what we could afford. And when the
Yeah.
riots happened, my mom was scared. She was the only white woman in the neighborhood, and she was raising us in LA. And she would go to work, and prior to the riots, she would hear from her coworkers how their kids were either going to jail or being murdered. And they would be
From that
working.
area, or?
Yeah, they'd be at work, and somebody would go, ah, just break down crying, get on their knees in the middle of the Teledyne in the electronic department, and they would be like, dang, and then they would find out what happened. So either that woman's son was murdered or sent to jail facing life. So it was like, she couldn't take it. She was like, I'm moving you guys out of here. So the riots were what got her in high gear. After the National Guard coming in, her being in a prison in the apartment, and then she finally comes out, the neighborhood's burned down. She was like, I'm out of here, I fear for my life. So she left, and I designate that as police instigated violence because it wasn't the community that instigated that. It was really aggressive police officers who were torturing people in the community. Similar to what I experienced in prison, they started this in the community and started that event, which
Which
set my
led.
life on a course where I had my mother, my whole family always had that view of police officers as the aggressor, as the enemy. And I had it in my head early on because I would ask my mom, why did we move? The police officers beat somebody and there was unrest. And the police officers and National Guards killed our neighbor in the same apartment complex. The same night that we went on lockdown, they killed our neighbor who was an Asian man. He was out past curfew. So when she moves us to Riverside County, my next interaction with law enforcement was one pulling me out of my house and dragging me into behind a house and threatening to beat me up.
My gosh, and how old were you?
I was probably 6 at that age.
God.
And that was Officer Guzman. Prior to that, I remember the officers breaking out our car window and pulling us over, and so it was always like a fear of law enforcement. I never had a moment where I was like, I want to grow up to be a police officer, which that would have been really cool to have. But in our society and in California, our law enforcement aren't heroes. I mean, some of them could be heroes, but for a lot of us where we grow up, law enforcement is a villain. Law enforcement is a evil entity, and there's a lot of them. Not all of them have that evil entity inside of them, but because they're associated and they're affiliated, same way I was sent to prison for life is the same way they're able to abuse us. And if they overlook it, they play a role. Just the same way I was sent to prison for life for not killing anybody, that's the same way all law enforcement is responsible for any murder that they commit, especially if it's in their department and they're quiet about it.
Yeah. So, what made you write this book? What was your, I mean, I think that we all go through emotions and decision making, things that happen in our life, epiphany or whatever. What inspired you to write this book, and what is your mission with this?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
So first of all, I thought it was important that I survived because in my community, I barely survived my community. I was around multiple shootings, gang members, and I always put myself out there in a dangerous position. And I was at the age, I just turned 15, so I was starting to get hit on, or hit up by hit on, but hit up by rival
I was like, what?
by rival gang members. They were hitting me up, and I was getting spared. They weren't jumping me, they weren't shooting me because I was so young. They were giving me passes, but I don't know what that would have turned into. But when I was incarcerated and I hit Pelican Bay, I knew that I survived, and God came into my life in juvenile hall and changed my life and got me away from using drugs and being a follower. God got me away from following people in my community, and I started following Jesus' example and the example he put down for all of us in the entire globe. I started following that, wanted to emulate being humble and peaceful. Not being weak and soft, but being humble and peaceful. And that carries strength, and that'll get you far anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
regardless. And of course, it was going to get me far in prison. So that's what made me initially want to start crafting this book. And of course, it took 12 years to finish this book. So I would say this
That's a
book
long
started in
time.
Pelican Bay, and it ended now in 2022. And a lot of it was just the fact that I survived. It's a testament to the grace that God has, that God will let me get to the edge where I'm supposed to die, where I'm not supposed to be here, and let me go to the dark side because I was all the way away from God. The devil had a hold of me,
Yeah.
and then for God to save me, twist it, let me be a walking, living testimony, and survive that, and come out here and be married, have a baby, and fall in love, and get that gift and share my story is
Yeah.
that's what motivated me to write this book and share the story.
So you were inspired by God and
There was other human
the
inspirations.
whole, basically you did a
Yeah.
180.
I did, yeah. Yeah,
You
my whole
know?
life changed. I went from being really selfish, not caring about people, to loving people I've never met, wanting to help people whenever I can.
Yeah.
There was other inspirations though, because I read Nelson Mandela's book, I read Tookie Williams' book, and Nelson Mandela, his whole country was against him. Not
Yeah.
his people, the government, the whole government was against him, and
Yeah.
I felt like we're like that in California prisons. The structure of society is against you, which is at the end of the day the government, and it's trying to harm you and hurt you, and that's what he faced.
Yeah.
Different level, different topics, but it was similar. He was in prison, came back, he became president. Tookie
Yeah.
Williams started something that affected me because my neighborhood was ran and dominated by Crips. He was one of the originators out there with the founders, and he was a part of that, changed his life, and he was trying to keep Crips from killing each other and causing havoc in the community. He was trying to make it a positive thing, and instead of an evil thing that just eats at its own people. And he was reaching kids in Africa, so I think Crips spread to Africa, and that was powerful. So a lot of those early stories, even Monster Cody, which was Monster Cody was in my area. He met people where I grew up. They knew him too.
Yeah.
He's from South Central, but the way he wrote in his writings, I can't say he 100% changed his life, but he 100% had a different way of thinking where he didn't want to destroy his own community, and to see him make a transformation was inspirational, powerful. So I know my book is different. I'm not necessarily
And this also gives a testament to those mothers and sisters and wives whose husbands, sons, best friends, grandkids are still in prison and are still behind bars. This definitely gives hope to people. I know that at my work, one of my coworkers, her husband is still in prison somewhere up in Northern California. But I got to tell her about Sean, and I got to tell her the story that, everything that God did in his life and how he's out here. I mean, he's a walking miracle out here and, with us. And it motivated her and it motivated her husband to look at his situation, get a lawyer, and now he has, he's coming out in 2 years. So it's amazing what one story could do for other people, and basically that's what testimonies is. God can do it again and can do it in other people too. What he can do for us, he can do for you and for your loved ones. God doesn't love us anymore than he loves everybody else, because we are all his children. And is there anything else that you would want to say, maybe to kids that could be watching this in the future? Somebody that, could be falling into the wrong path and just by miracle could be watching this in the future, and maybe you could tell them something to inspire them and to remind them,
I'd love to.
Yeah.
First off, thank you for having me on your YouTube channel and your show and allowing me to be your producer and cameraman. You're the sweetest and the best. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it warms my heart. I'm honored to be here. Hopefully you'll get more guests soon. Yeah, so the message I have for you, if you're out there, you're young, and you're trying to figure out life. I know you have dreams, right? You want to be something special. You want to do something good. Even if you just want to have a kickback, chill life, that's attainable for you regardless of where you come from. If you have a community where you're scared to go outside because you might get jumped, or you feel like you could go outside because you're cool with the people that might do some jumping to somebody else, whichever position you find yourself in, whether you're the aggressor or just trying to survive, there's a future for you and hope for you and a life for you beyond just your community. If you want to stay in your community forever and live and die there, that's fine. But uplift your community. You're a treasured part of it. Even as a part of your community that you might be causing harm right now doesn't mean you have to cause harm forever. You could grow out of that. You can mature. Everybody's going to respect your honesty and your ability to stand up. Everybody's going to like you if you take care of your neighborhood. Like if you see somebody throw trash on the ground, that should be considered disrespect to your community if you're from there and you love it. So just tell your people to clean that up, or you clean it up for them, and then hopefully one day they'll come clean it up. But it's all in the little things, because by the time you find yourself going to jail, you're going to learn a lot of valuable lessons that you wish you knew out there on the streets. And if you would apply those on the streets, you would have never been in prison or jail. Because you get to prison or jail, it doesn't matter how much work you put in on the streets, everybody's equal. There's no more guns. If you didn't do a lot of push-ups and working out on the streets, by the time you get to jail, you could be at the physical mercy of somebody that's been doing 1,000 push-ups a day. So you're going to want to have a humble, respectful demeanor, regardless of your status out in the community. And even if you're a big dude and you go into jail, if you're not a humble, respectful dude, you're not going to be liked that much. And as soon as somebody gets the opportunity to do something to you, whether they sneak up on you, that's going to be done. Or whether you get jumped, that's going to be done. Whether it's an officer setting you up, putting you in a tank with 20 people who want to get you, it's going to be done. So the best advice I have to you is just be humble regardless of how much stature and power you have, and get people to love you, because the worst respect you can have is respect based on fear. That doesn't last, and you're going to lose at the end of the day, and there's no easy way out. You're going to suffer at the end, whether you pass away early or not. It's going to be it's just unhealthy, man. So I would just encourage you to be humble, be graceful, strive to get to heaven. If there's a time where you feel like you have to do something really bad, take a couple of days to think about it, man. Go to sleep, because there's a lot of times where the rules and my feelings dictated I had to do something violent, and then I went to sleep and woke up that next day and I said, I'm so glad that God let me go to sleep and think about this, because now I realize that I'm only going to be hurting myself, because you're your worst enemy. No one else can do nothing to you. You make your choice to receive it and take it in the way you want. So my advice to you, man, is just try to be humble and get through it, and you will get through it. At the end of the day, you're going to make it. It don't matter what situation you're in or what you did. I've seen people cut people's heads off and come home. I've seen people murder people with baseball bats and come home. So it doesn't matter how bad you are, how lost you are. There's salvation for you, and people love you. I love you at the end of the day. So, take that and do what you want with it. Well, bless you. Yep.
So proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yes, guys, go ahead and check out Amazon. It is self-titled book, Sean Khalifa.
Riots, violence, drugs, police, gangs, prison, and college.
Amen.
Amen.
And thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe this video. And congratulations to you guys. Make sure that every day you remind yourself that you're doing a great job, that you are staying positive and taking one day at a time. That's all that it takes. Remember that no matter how small you feel or big, that God is in control and He loves you so, so much.